Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to do a quick intro on this one because it's a little bit unique and different in that we did a live stream over on Facebook, and I'm going to be doing some more of them in the future. If you'd like to be a part of them and watching them live as we unravel them, you can ask questions, be a part of them. We post memes, we give the bottles a couple weeks in advance so you can engage at home and be a part of them. We also do a small happy hour afterwards where you can engage in a Q&A or just join me for a glass of wine. You can do that again on Facebook. The name of the group is WineBob Happy Hour. I hope to see you there and share some more with you in the future. Cheers. Hi everyone, welcome to WineBob. This is my first time I've ever done live before, so this is kind of an exciting thing. I do everything in my garage, so if there's any ambient noise from things happening inside or things happening outside, there's not a lot of insulation in it, so this is just kind of it's an experiment. We're trying something new. We've got kind of an exciting show going on today, and it's mainly featured around rosé. So we've got 3 different rosés that we're going over, and we're still going to be focusing on the old world versus new world kind of features. And so from the old world, we're focusing on a couple of different wines. We've got the Minuti, Chateau Minuti, which is actually an area in the Côte de Provence. Côte de Provence is an appellation area that is in the southern part of France, right off of, so if you follow the Rhone Valley down into the southern France and continue east from there, you've got Provence, Côte de Provence, and a lot of the appellation areas over there. If instead from west bank of the Rhone River, you're gonna be ending up in an area called the Languedoc and Roussillon region, which they specialize in some rosés, reds, whites, and it's actually one of the few areas in France where you can actually get wines that will state what the varietals of the wines are on those specific wines. So from an area in Nîmes, which is actually on the eastern side of the appellation of the Languedoc-Roussillon, is Chateau Campouget. So we're going to be featuring a rosé from each side of the Rhone. There's not a huge difference in style, but actually what's interesting about both these wines is that what makes old world rosés so wonderful is that they have this nice vibrancy to them. They have this nice mineral driven focus, and what kind of helps moderate the temperatures in these areas is they are close to large bodies of water. So the Chateau Minuti in Côte de Provence is right off the Mediterranean, so you've got that large body of water that is going to moderate a lot of those temperatures. And Chateau Campouget is right off of the Rhone Delta, again on the left bank, on the west bank of the Rhone River. So again, another body of water that's really going to start to moderate temperatures in that area as well. You also have Mistral winds, which is actually a very important wind feature, kind of like in California how we have the Santa Anas. There they've got the Mistral, and the Mistral has a cooling effect as well as a drying effect. So the nice thing about these regions in the south is that they're in a better position to engage in organic and biodynamic farming. And a lot of them have been doing it for years and years and years without having any of these certifications because they don't need to have these chemical interventions. So it's kind of an interesting thing that they're just kind of in these ideal climates to be producing these vibrant, beautiful wines. And the nice thing about French wines in general is that because they've been doing it for so long, they've really figured out which grapes grow best in which areas, so you can get the best wine from the best regions, from the best producers, without spending an arm and a leg. But again, you've got a lot of science and a lot of art and a lot of focus behind these wines that goes back generations. So then going into the new world, and this kind of juxtaposition in terms of quality of wine making versus bulk winemaking as well, we're going to be focusing on Jam Cellars Rosé. It's the Candy Rosé. Now, if you've seen labels similar to this, there's also Toast and Butter are other labels that are followed under the same producer, and this producer comes out of Napa Valley, but this wine is not labeled as Napa Valley. So in previous videos we went over appellations and what that meant in France, and so again, this was from the Côte de Provence appellation, this was from the Nîmes appellation, and we have a very similar system in California. And so in California we have the American Viticultural Area, or AVA, and it operates very similar to the way that appellations operate in France. This is not from Napa Valley, even though the producer's in Napa Valley. This is actually a California proper. And so you can actually see that at the very bottom of the bottle. Sorry, I'll try and get as close as I can for you. So the grapes that produce this wine can come from anywhere in California. And actually the way California law works, and my apologies if I'm a little off on this number, but I think if it says California on the bottle, technically only 85% of the grapes have to come from California. Whereas if you look at, the Minuti from Côte de Provence and the Campouget from Nîmes, all of the grapes have to come from this region. So it's an interesting little twist that we have here in California, is that the restrictions aren't quite as strict, they're not quite as bold as you get in some of these old world countries, which tends to lend, especially on the bulk wine side, to having a much more fluid profile. So it's when you've got these terroir forward styles, or you've got these super tasters who can taste a wine and tell you, oh, this is from this region of France, or oh, this is from this region in Italy, in certain parts of California, you can't do that, especially in something that's from California proper, because they're blending from all of these different areas. You'll get super tasters that can tell you the difference between Russian River Pinot Noir and Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir and Oregon Pinot Noir, because again, those are more specific regional designations that all, again, still fall under the AVA designation. But when you get into these really general designations like California or Oregon, it gets a little bit more muddled. So again, this is just a bulk producer, candy. They also make Chardonnays, they make Cabernet Sauvignon, but they're just going to be under slightly different labels. Again, toast or candy or butter or whatever they decide to do for that one. There are 3 different processes that they can go through to make rosé. You can either macerate the wine, meaning that you take the skins from the red grapes that are going into the blend and you just dip them into the juice long enough to extract some of the color from the skins, which gives it a little bit that rose color to it. You can do blending, which is adding white wine and red wine together to make rosé, or you can do a press. So if you're pressing the grapes to get all of the juice out of them, if you press hard enough, you get some of that color extraction as well. And so those are the 3 different ways that you can make rosé. And in most regions, especially when it comes to French rosés, they typically don't allow blending. You get blending a little bit more in the States, or you get it a little bit more with lower end rosés, but generally speaking, for higher end rosés, you're going to be looking at a maceration style, or you're going to be looking at that extraction of color that comes from that press. So again, we're looking at a couple of different things here. We're looking at New World versus Old World. We're also looking at kind of a higher quality producer versus a lower quality producer. And so you'll kind of hear me jumping around a little bit in terms of what I'm talking about. But if you have any questions, feel free to post them. And although I can't see perfectly well on my screen because I'm not wearing my glasses, I'll do the best that I can to answer your questions as they come up. So I'm going to start with the Minuti. The reason why I'm going to start with the Minuti is that it's the lightest of the styles. And also, if you remember some from our previous videos, Old World wines in general are not going to have that same fruit profile. So what little fruit is there, I want to be able to taste when I'm doing my tasting. If I go from a really fruit forward wine to something where the fruit component's a little bit more subtle, it's going to really mute out that fruit component, and all I'm going to be able to taste is that, kind of tartness, that mineral style or that savory style, which isn't really what I want to do. I really kind of want to see the wine in its wholeness. So I'm going to go from the driest, crispest, most mineral-driven style to the fullest body, most fruit-forward style. Now, one more thing that I want to note is that all these wines are dried, meaning that they don't really have residual sugar to them. So if you're someone who doesn't like sweet wines, that's fine. These should actually work for you fairly well. You can still find producers out there that make sweet rosés. If anybody's ever had like white Zinfandel or something like that, that's kind of a sweeter style. It's still a rosé, even though they call it a white Zinfandel. All they're really doing is they're taking the Zinfandel grapes, they're pressing the juice off, and then they're either adding color by one of those 3 processes. Though when they do the fermentation, they're leaving a little bit of sweetness on the inside of it, so you get a little bit more of that luscious fruit style, as well as some of that sweetness, which kind of makes it more gulpable. It's also what made it so popular when it came out. So sorry, I don't mean to tangent too much on you. I'm going to go ahead and try the Minuti for you. Now with some of these French styles, you can get this really nice light rose color to it. I know in the lighting it kind of looks a little bit orange, but this is not unusual to have this lightness of color. They don't typically do these really bold styles. They don't do these really heavily extracted styles. So this is just kind of nice, light, refreshing, vibrant style. And kind of the benefit of that is, as we're going into the summer months and we're getting a lot of this heat, this is a really nice option for wine. If you're not super into white, you're more of a red person, this is a nice little middle ground that you can jump into something that's still fairly refreshing that you can enjoy out on your porch or with your family if and when you feel comfortable with them coming over. So right off the bat, just smelling this, I'm getting a lot of these stone fruits. I'm getting things like peaches or nectarines, kind of these underripe fruits, strawberries, even a little bit of raspberry. I'm getting some floral components as well, some like citrus blossoms or honeysuckle, which it's really, really pretty. And that's what I kind of like about the Côte de Provence style. They tend to do the rosés out of a combination of Grenache and Cinsault, and both tend to show a nice elegance in their final wine. So they tend to show this nice floral component. They tend to show this nice stone fruit or red fruit component to it. And I think it shines really well here. It has this mineral driven component to it that I'm getting, this like dusty river rock component to it that I think is really pretty. But again, this is completely normal of the style. And you're gonna expect that kind of on both of the French rosés, and that you're gonna have this mineral style. But generally speaking, you're not going to get a huge amount of complexity on it, but you are going to get some of the stone fruit, you are going to get these red fruits, you'll get the mineral, you'll get some citrus aspects to it, and that's kind of the depth of character that you get on these rosés. Because again, you're not getting, where you're getting a lot of aromas and where you get a lot of flavors is from the skins, and so since the skins play so little interaction when it comes to rosé, you're not going to be extracting a lot of the aromas, you're not going to be extracting a lot of these flavors. So you get this kind of like lighter, fluttery, subtle style, which again can be very lovely, but you're not going to be getting the complexity that you would expect out of, Cabernet Sauvignon or Syrah or something like that, or like these higher end, highly extracted wines. They kind of play a little bit more subtle, a little bit more fluttery, a little bit more elegant. Ooh. This is actually one of my favorite rosés that's accessible at the grocery stores. Because again, it is very vibrant. So I was talking about that citrus blossom, and it really comes through on the palate, and it kind of paired well with this like lemon lime component, those underripe stone fruits like peaches or nectarines, along with this really kind of like greener strawberry, even greener raspberry. So everything about this is kind of tart, very vibrant to the point where it almost wakes you up. It just kind of has this really like eye-opening effect, and that's part of why rosé is a nice thing to have in the summer. Is if the sun's bogging you down, the heat's getting you, something bright like this, like lemonade, has the same effect where it just kind of wakes you up a little bit. So aside from the fruits, I still get a lot of this mineral style. Like I was saying before, get a little bit of this river rock. And other than that, like, you've got that citrus blossom, you've got the fruit, you've got this mineral, and that's kind of it, which in my experience with Côte de Provence rosés, that's kind of all that's there to have. Is usually you'll have some component of fruit, you'll have this component of earthiness, and this floral aspect, but they play together fairly well. Generally speaking, in the Côte de Provence, you are going to be having, like I was saying earlier, the Grenache and the Cinsault, and so I believe this is like a 60-40 blend or something in that ballpark. But Minuti's been making rosés in that region for the better part of the 20th century under present day, and what's really nice about the Côte de Provence is a majority of what they're producing in that region is rosé. If you look in your grocery store and you go into the rosé section, almost, I would argue, at least half of what you're going to be looking at is from Côte de Provence, and you can kind of tell them because they've got these funkier bottles. I mean, you can tell the curves on this kind of like this hourglass style. You're going to have all sorts of different bottles as far as the Côte de Provence is concerned, and it really doesn't say anything about the quality or even like it's not, it doesn't say anything about the wine itself. It's kind of the fun thing that region does, is they always have kind of these interesting bottles. So, I mean, next time you're in your grocery store, take a look at your rosé section and look at how many weird bottles there are, and I will argue that almost all of those are coming from the Côte de Provence region. If you want something that's a higher quality, something to look for from the Côte de Provence is on the bottle, look for something that says Cru Classé. Cru is C-R-U, and then Classé is C-L-A-S-S-E. I think it's about 27 are designated in the Côte de Provence area, and they are all associated with this higher quality of winemaking style. So again, there's a ton of producers that make rosé through the Côte de Provence, but if you're looking for this higher quality winemaking, go for something on the Cru Classé lineup. So I'm going to go ahead and pour out what's left of that. I'm going to move on to the Chateau Campouget. Now again, the Côte de Provence is on the eastern side of the Rhône River, and Chateau Campouget is from Nîmes, which is on the western side of the Rhône River. So we're staying in France, we're just going to the other side of the river. The Côte de Provence is right off of the Mediterranean, which is a huge moderating influence, and Campouget has a very similar moderating influence. That's the Rhône Delta. So you should still have this nice vibrancy to it. You should still have this earthy style, and it should actually be fairly similar. So even though we are moving into an area that should technically be warmer, when you've got these geographical influences, it can play in a way that allows you to do this lighter style of wine that's a little bit more food friendly or even just, you know, friendly drinking. So right off the bat, I kind of have to let this breathe a little bit, and part of the reason for that is it seems, they call it reductive is what it is, and a reductive winemaking style is if you've got a wine that undergoes oak aging or is in oak at all, oxygen is allowed to kind of be in contact with the wine to some extent, and it plays into the wine in a way that makes it a little bit softer. If it is in an inert vessel where oxygen is not allowed to get in contact with it, then it can sometimes get this like stinkiness to it, and it blows off after a little while, but it just means that this was made in stainless steel vessels where oxygen was not allowed to be in contact with the wine. So just kind of swirl it up a little bit, let it open up, and it really just kind of like blows off after, you know, just a minute or two. Oh yeah, it's already starting to open up. So right off the bat, I get a lot of the earthiness. Before with this one, I was talking a little bit more about the citrus blossoms. This one kind of focuses a little bit more on the earthier side of it. Oh wow. So again, we were talking about having this warmer region, and it really kind of shows in the fruit profile of this wine. Whereas we were talking about these like underripe fruits on this wine, with the Campouget, what I'm getting is I get like these ripe peaches, I get these ripe apricots, a lot more on the stone fruit side. I'm not getting a lot of these red citrus fruits. I don't get a lot of that red floral aspect, or sorry, the red fruit or even like the citrus floral component that I was getting with the other wine. This is much more fruit and earth, and it's a little bit more simple in its profile. Not to say that this is a bad winemaker, it's a bad wine, it's just it doesn't have as much to offer in terms of how it unfolds on the palate. So I get kind of this like jammy stone fruit, like I was saying, like yellow peaches or apricot, and then this kind of general minerality to it. Yeah, I don't know. Almost like straw or hay or even like this light vegetation. And then as far like this dusty dirt, like not really like wet dirt, but you know, something that you're just like running in the dirt and it just kind of kicks up, just something that's lightly dusty. It's not a very complex wine. I'd say this is a little bit more on the simple side, but still fairly easily drinkable. I could see this as kind of a porch pounder or something you just take outside and enjoy. I'd say, for something that's a little bit more vibrant and a little bit more well structured, like the Minuti, some people might consider this more of a food wine, and this would not hold up as well, in my opinion, to food. So that might be something that you just kind of want to take out back. Still a beautiful wine. And now we're going to kind of move in contrast to, again, the candy is what we're going to be doing. That's the California Rosé. I was telling you that we have the Grenache Cinsault. The Campouget is 30% Grenache and then 70% Syrah. And I'm not 100% sure what the blend on this is, but if you can see, I'll kind of show you. We had that nice lightness on the Côte de Provence, a little bit darker on the Campouget, but then look at this guy. I mean, that is a dark wine. Okay, and at least for most of the rosés that I've seen from the New World, you get a little bit more of this extraction. And I mean, part of my guess would be that because it's a warmer region, we tend to have a little bit more ripeness, and so the extraction just kind of comes easily. But let's go ahead and give this a shot. As we've talked about a number of times before, we're expecting a little bit more of this fruitier style. So actually, surprisingly, I get kind of an earthiness right off the bat, but it's like this petrol-y characteristic, which is kind of interesting. You usually get petrol on a couple of different varietals, so it could just be something that's varietal in character and not something that's necessarily this terroir-driven intention. But other than that, I get ripe peaches, I get ripe nectarines, I get this mandarin orange, fruit cocktail. And it just coats your mouth, and it's almost like a fruit roll-up. On the nose, you can kind of pinpoint some specific fruits, but on the palate, it all kind of melds together. And I mean, again, these are all ripe fruits. It still has a little bit of acidity to hold it up, but again, this is much more about the body of the wine. I would probably want to eat some food with this, but actually, I'm looking at the alcohol right now. It's actually relatively low. This is a 12% wine. The Minuti was at 13%, and I think the Campouget is just a little bit bigger than that. So actually, out of all three of these wines, this is the lowest of the three. But something, the palate itself comes out much rounder, much more rich in style. So it's, I don't know where to really put this. I'm surprised that it presents as heavy as it does, considering how light the alcohol is. But between these three, I mean, I'm not sure what your style preference is, but the Minuti, I would say, definitely has the lightest of the three profiles, presents with the most complexity. It's got the earth, it's got the fruit, it's got the floral components to it. The Campouget, I would say I enjoyed the second most. I'd say maybe I'd put this at about 4.5 stars out of 5. I'd probably drop this down to 4 because it just doesn't have the same level of complexity and manicure that the Minuti does. It's just lacking a little bit of that floral component. And then the candy, the California Candy Rosé, I'd probably put it about 3 stars out of 5, because again, that fruit just isn't really descriptive enough. I really can't say enough about it because it kind of melds together and has this simple kind of fruit roll-up kind of characteristic to it, and that petrol aspect that I was getting on the nose isn't really there on the palate. It's just kind of an easy drinking, richer style. So again, depending on what your preference is, if you like a lighter wine, I'd say go for the Minuti. If you want something kind of at a lower price point that still presents very similarly, the Campouget is honestly a really good runner-up. And I think it's like $5 cheaper, because I think this is about 20. I think this runs at about 15. And then I was seeing the candy in some places for about $10 to $15 as well. And again, if you want something a little bit fuller, a little bit richer style, the candy is probably your go-to, but I think you could probably find something better in California that shows just a little bit better quality. Again, a lot of these rosés that you're going to be coming in contact with in the grocery stores are going to be dry in style, and if it is going to be sweet, usually it's going to say it on the label. especially as far as California is concerned. If it's going to be sweet, it's going to say it. If it's from France, you're going to want to look for specific words that are going to indicate that level of sweetness, whether it's something along the lines of sec or demi-sec or dry or off-dry or something like that. Usually it should give you some indication about whether or not there's a level of sugar in there. But for the most part, your French rosés are going to come off pretty dry. Anyway, I hope that was informative to you in some way, and I hope I was able to explain that for you. Thank you very much for joining me today. Again, this is the first time I've ever done that, so if you have any feedback, you can go ahead and leave it for me in the comments, and I would hopefully be able to build a better program for you guys for next week. Next week, we are going to be covering our intro into Burgundy. And it's very informationally dense. Burgundy is kind of a fun one for me because first off, I was able to go there, which I really feel blessed to be able to have that opportunity. But it's an area that has been engaged in winemaking practices for thousands of years, and you're not really going to have that same level of dedication to the craft anywhere else in the world. So the amount of information that they have in terms of their dirt alone it can be overwhelming. So we're going to break it up into 2 videos. We're going to do the first video covering, I think I'll probably do white Burgundy first. And so we'll look at domestic Chardonnay versus white Burgundy, which again is going to be Chardonnay from France. And then the following week we'll do the same thing on the red side. We'll do Russian River Pinot Noir versus the red Burgundy that we have from Bouchard. The nice thing about that is that at least, again, we can continue to reiterate this old world versus new world kind of idea. And then in addition to that, we can highlight what I consider to be one of the most important wine regions in the entire world. So I really look forward to sharing that with you guys. Thank you very much for joining me with this. And again, just leave some comments and suggestions about how I can improve some of these lifestyles, because this is kind of like a free-form thing. It's not something that I'm terribly used to, but I really would appreciate your feedback all the same. I look forward to sharing this with you guys some more in the future, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Cheers.